All right, good evening, everybody. It's August 26th. We are going to start tonight's meeting with an update on stormwater regulations from our planning director, Anna Crane.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So I'm just going to do a fairly quick update. I want to just run you through some of the additions and changes after our last discussion. So just to start, we'll remind ourselves what the principles and goals of the lot coverage regulations are. So right now we're really addressing preservation of open space related to the character and well-being, stormwater runoff, and then also reducing the heat island effect. So a combination of kind of character, feeling, and also environmental impacts. So we held a discussion session with the Plan Commission and with the board. We had some good comments and questions that were made there. Then staff had follow-up discussion with MSD where we kind of went through some of the larger regional initiatives, some of how they would approach the smaller sites, talked about the specifics of the issues that we're trying to address in Clayton and how we can do so in a way that works well with what MSD is doing in the larger site areas. And then we've had multiple discussions with our consultants, Intuition Logic, who are helping us with this text amendment, and also dove into the green space regulations. So a big question that kind of came out of the discussions that we've had after the last presentation, I think one way to frame the stormwater is to really think about what we're trying to address with these regulations. Stormwater regulations in general tend to go for either addressing peak flow rate or addressing volume. There's some overlap there, but those are two distinct ways that stormwater is what it's going to regulate. So peak flow rate is looking at the speed of water that's leaving the site during a storm event. And the high peak flows, those can overwhelm our sewer systems, which leads to flooding. So it can either lead to flooding because of that peak flow and the rates going across the property into somebody else's house, or the actual sewer system itself can have backups and then that results in flooding. The best way to address the peak flow rate is actually through a retention or a detention basin where you're collecting water and you're holding it and you're slowly releasing it over time. So the same volume of water that eventually gets into the sewer system it would be the same before and after the storm. It's just the timing of how that water enters the system during a storm event. So dry wells, that type of a system is not as good at impacting our peak flow rate because dry wells have a different outlet source. So the dry well actually collects the water to allow it to be infiltrated into the ground rather than holding it for that slower release rate. Once the dry well is full, then the overflow of the dry well is just running straight through as if the dry well didn't exist. So that flow rate on the surface is the same. There's not any mitigation of that flow rate. The other thing that you address is the volume of stormwater leaving the site. So this is just the cubic feet or the gallons. So with volume, some of the impacts we're really looking to address are relating to the stormwater quality. So as the volume of water leaves the site, is it clean? And then also recharging that groundwater. So the volume of the flow actually restores kind of the natural being of the water getting into the ground system rather than into a piping system. And so volume is really a little bit more directly related to the actual impervious surface. So if you reduce the driveways and you reduce the roof, you're reducing the volume. Whereas the peak flow, it's again about that rate, but it doesn't change the actual volume that leaves. So dry wells can be an effective tool for volume because we're getting the water into the ground. So when we keep both of those in mind, I'll come back to them in a second, but I wanted to touch on the green space recommendations because this is where most of the change has come. So previous discussions, we talked about how we were going to move from a lot coverage maximum to a green space ratio. So the primary goal here is to separate that green space, the natural character protections from the stormwater regulations. So the graph that is on your screen actually looks at the existing impervious coverage. This was data that we got through the comprehensive plan that then we have refiltered with a giant pivot table to look at that coverage by neighborhood and then subcategory of the zoning. So the light yellow here, those are all the R1s. The more medium yellow is R2 district. And then as you get darker in orange, you go up to our actual multifamily districts. The dots here, that's at 55%. So that's our current maximum impervious coverage. So you can see our maximum coverage. Most of our R1 and R2 residential neighborhoods are actually below the maximum coverage when you look at the existing. So this is the existing average. So we have obviously some lots that are over coverage and some that are under, but most of them are meeting. What we did is we actually then started to look at the specific neighborhoods and found that the more of the newer houses are the ones that are bringing that average up. So if you look at the top R2 districts, aside from High Point, which is our smallest lot area for R2, our Old Town, Clayton Gardens, they've seen substantial rebuild. So they're trending towards getting above that 55%. And then our multifamily, with the exception of the Clayshire R4 area, is actually exceeding that 55%. So when we look at trying to address the green space ratio and the neighborhood character, what we're recommending is that we change it from a lot coverage maximum and we switch to a minimum green space requirement. For the purposes of this chart, because it's looking at impervious coverage, the dots show where, or the lines show where impervious coverage would be. So for R1, we want to go from a 45% green space to 55% green space. And that is the kind of grayish line here. So you can see that still, even with that reduction, that would align with most of our R1 districts. They're still going to be below that. So we're not creating a significant amount of nonconformity in those neighborhoods. We're more so starting to align with where they are. In R2, we're proposing to go from 45% green space to 50% green space, which is the middle black line here. So there are a few neighborhoods that would have an average impervious coverage that would exceed that new threshold, but that's just the average. So there'd still be a decent amount of homes, the majority of R2 homes, that would be compliant with this green space ratio. We want to revise the maximum front yard coverage to align with that. So part of the front yard coverage will come in a secondary text amendment because we are getting all of that data for with our neighborhood analysis. So we'll have a better idea of where to place that number at a later date. And then we want to establish a green space definition. So this is where we'll be very clear that permeable pavement, decks, pools, anything that is not actual green space would not count towards your green space ratio. So it doesn't really matter whether or not that area is letting water infiltrate, it's not considered green space. So that's the biggest difference, is really separating out those two goals. So for stormwater regulations, with the idea in mind of the volume versus peak flow, I want to walk through a couple of changes or areas that we've kind of added or enhanced. So with the smaller lots that we have, the lot sizes that we have in our residential district, it's much more feasible for us to try and address the volume versus the peak flow. Peak flow requires the larger detention areas to slow the water down so it can be stored during a storm event, and our smaller sites just it will become quite burdensome, we feel, to address that. So we think that some of the right sizing that we're doing with our coverage requirements, green space, everything that I'll go through here is going to do a good job of addressing volume. And some of the lesser benefits of those is also to address peak flow. So the yellow areas I've highlighted, these are the ones that are either new or changed in response to some of the questions that came up in the discussion. So I'm just going to touch on those instead of all of the other areas, unless there's a follow-up question. We had a lot of discussion with MSD about how we want to do the differential detention requirement. We are going to increase the calculation area, so that will increase whatever their storage volume that they have to mitigate on their site is. But because we're separating out the green space ratio, we're able to actually follow the MSD definitions for impervious material. And this will be important, and we want to do this to create consistency as the larger lots, so a new subdivision or a site over an acre, will go through the MSD regulations. It makes a lot of sense for us on our smaller lots to use similar calculation methods. So we're going to use their definitions for impervious material as it relates to stormwater, but we'll have our own definition for green space ratio with the character. There was a lot of discussion and question about the pop-ups being located 10 feet from the property, and does that really address the downslopes and the issues that we have with neighbors? So we've added a couple of additional guidelines for how those will be located. Discharging on a slope must include erosion protection measures. So that will help with that overland flow, so we won't get those ruts that are created from a pop-up that's constantly working when the ground is kind of eroded, and that increases the actual flow rate of the water that comes out as that erosion happens. And then secondly, adding in some more specific requirements so that somebody who is uphill from their neighbor couldn't essentially pave where their overland flow is. So the overland flow is when the water comes out of the pop-up emitter and it's just running across the surface and it's following the natural grade. So adding a requirement that if you're uphill, your natural grade where your water is flowing couldn't go onto a driveway or a sidewalk or something that's intentionally trying to get that water at a quicker rate to the neighboring property.
Can I ask a question on that number 3? My recollection is that when we discussed this before, one of the potential solutions was if there was, it was to run the water to the street. And I'm guessing MSD doesn't want that to be the case given the 10-foot setback. So is that what you found?
Yes, so they a lot of the MSD regulations would prevent us from dumping it right onto their street. So again, attaching it. There are instances where they might approve a direct connection to a sewer. We're not going to get involved in that. That's up to their discretion. But we have a lot of property where there is a natural slope to a rear yard of somebody's property. And it would take a lot of mechanics to try and fight that to get the water out to the street. Water is going to just naturally find the easiest path. So even if we were to require the pop-up to be in the front yard, there's still going to be a lot of water that would flow into the rear yard. So the 10-foot setback aligns with what MSD's requirements are, but then adding these little caveats almost, depending on the type of location, we hope will help some of the impacts for those downhill neighbors.
Anna, do you think like the 10-foot setback is good for, I mean, do you think that'll be significant enough when there is a severe slope in preventing like for instance, what's going on Topton where we've got pop-ups that are constantly discharging into the street and they're all on relative hills. So
we've added some other design guidelines that will get into play with that. If you increase the setback, again, water is powerful. It's going to find the easiest way. So even if you increase that setback, if you don't have some intervention in the volume or the flow rate, it's still going to, it might take 2 seconds longer, but the same volume is going to end up at the same point at the sidewalk. So that's why we're going to add, we have some other elements that I'll get into that will kind of try and address the slowing of that water during the storm events.
or do you require then a dry well in those
It's
places
a
where there's like a
combination,
slope?
right?
Okay.
So some of the issues that we have in Topton and other areas are actually where there's sump pumps attached to them. So those pop-up emitters that you're seeing are related to are actually attached to a sump pump or some sort of pumping mechanism that's taking water out of an area where it's kind of stagnant. And so that's where, if that was the condition that would be proposed, there will be some additional requirements that they'll have to place to address it. Yeah.
Great.
Anna, question for you. So on number 1, like increasing that will do what for development?
Sure.
Like,
So it's, we ran some example numbers. Essentially what it will do is the actual differential volume that they have to mitigate on site will go up. Not so much that we think it will be infeasible or, overburdensome for our smaller lots, but it will be higher. So the coefficient, the actual rate that's attached to a 100-year storm event is actually lower than the 15-year, but because we're requiring the capture size for a 60-minute event, it goes back up again. So it basically means just a little bit more volume of water will have to be captured.
so does that mean for like a potentially like a new subdivision being built, would that mean they would need a larger piece of property that was unbuildable in order to retain the water, or how does
Yeah,
that?
so with a full new subdivision, that would fall under MSD's subdivision requirements as they plat that out. So that's where we went through and went back and forth with them on their subdivision requirements and the sizing of their detention basins and their larger detention ponds. That really addresses the peak flow. So that would be under MSD's guidelines. In going back and forth, we didn't want to get involved with some of that. But for our smaller site issues, it would. So if somebody's using a dry well, if they're building a rain garden, that sort of thing, they would have to have more capacity.
Okay.
One of the questions that was also asked previously was about the requirement for water table testing. So we got a little bit more information from our consultants about that. So essentially, if there's an area where we know there's a water table issue, so we have some pumps that are constantly running, so we think there might be a high groundwater, or a site where they're going to have significant excavation below grade. So if they're building a below grade garage, they're probably going to be excavating more than 12 feet into the ground. We're going to require a water table test. This will essentially determine that if they're going to be drawing groundwater with whatever pumping mechanism they have to protect their basement area. We want to know that because we'll be increasing the requirements. But this test, as you can see here, adds to the timeline and the cost for the project. So we don't want to just require it for every project. It's their estimation, not being the geotechnical engineers that actually perform the work, but they estimate it's probably somewhere around $2,000 to $5,000 depending on the test, and could add around an average of 30 days. Because they're needing to actually test where that water is. So that's why we've kind of narrowed it down to the types of projects that we think might actually need to have that water table test versus just every house.
So one of the things that's come up that I've heard from residents is kind of the ambiguity of the current process or confusion on the part of applicants. And so it seems like a number of the things that you've worked on will really help with that. So that's awesome. Thank you. This one, I'm trying to understand like how clear it's gonna be, this determination of like what is a high groundwater level area, or like, I almost wonder if you could map those out in advance, or like how do you intend to do that? Like at what point would a resident be able to know that their property is subject to this?
Subject to it. Yeah, that's actually a good question. There are some mapping tools that we've discussed with our consultant and with MSD. We don't have a groundwater study that goes, and I don't think that it would really be worth us spending the money to try to do that across everywhere. So we have starting points because we have the areas that we're seeing the constantly running pop-up emitters, which is a sign that they probably or could be drawing from groundwater. And that's why the pop-up's running every day of the year. So looking at things like that. But then there's actually a tool, and MSD said that they are confident enough they use the same data source. If you go on realtor.com, one of the layers you can actually pull up on the map, it will mark some flood zone, some flood prone areas. And so we found some data, we got some data, and MSD has some data it's from the same sources of what they're doing. And so one of the MSD recommendations was to kind of in a policy, not in our code, reference that. That's something that they have utilized with throughout their area. So it's very transparent because the community could go ahead and look at that map and look at their address too, and it would highlight an area. Yep.
Does it potentially change over time, like as climate changes or land changes, or?
It could, and excuse me, and the groundwater will fluctuate just throughout different times of year. So, yeah.
Thanks.
So design guidelines, this is kind of going into
Can you remind me the distinction you made between the white and the orange?
the oranger
Yeah.
areas that have either been added or revised slightly since our last discussion.
The last discussion.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
So what we've added here is building off of the idea of, are we trying to capture peak flow versus volume? We're starting to address that here with the dry wells and then the retention cells for the larger areas where we really want to that aligns with what MSD is doing. I will also mention that MSD is moving away from dry wells, especially on smaller sites in Missouri, because they're finding our soil types make it difficult for those. So it's no surprise that we're going through this process of having to evaluate them much more significantly. One area that we recommend referencing, so generally in chapter 430, our stormwater control regulations, we reference back to a lot of MSD guidelines as our starting point, but we don't really highlight specific regulations from MSD. Number 4 is one that I think is a key one for us to highlight, given some of our areas. They actually have a provision within their code that basically gives MSD, the district, the right to deny sump or basement garages. So they have some pretty high standards as to when they would approve them. Our smaller projects go through their review, but our projects are not really triggering the large scale review of a full subdivision. So by having this reference within our code, then we would be able to also be a little bit stricter in how we're enforcing it. Essentially, they require people who want to have a below grade garage to go through an additional analysis to show how the flooding of that garage would be handled, where you could use your driveway or your garage as the pond zone essentially. And it also requires the use of gravity drains and basically prohibits the use of pumps as a way of through the mechanics of getting the water out of your driveway, which is something that we actually see a lot of. So this will give us more power and authority to actually evaluate the overflow of below grade garages and how those driveways collect the water and how they're discharging it and potentially deny them through MSD.
So would that rule out sub pumps then for below garage?
So it doesn't necessarily rule out the sump pump, but so when there's a sump driveway and it's allowed by the district, then they also have to have these gravity drains. So essentially they're trying to intercept the water before it flows all the way down to the base of the driveway and then pump it all out that way.
Okay.
And so the pumped discharge is disallowed, meaning you can't just create a giant pit and then pump it out, is what they're saying. But we had a lot of conversations with them because obviously in the last 5 years, we've had a lot of below grade garages that rely on sump pumps constructed, and they have MSDP numbers, so they're going through the MSD approval rate. So this was a section that we were talked to them pretty extensively about, and decided after consulting with them and our own consultants that this would be an area that we could request the additional analysis the same way MSD does as part of our process to get an idea of what's happening.
I want to clarify that I understand the language here. So I'm a little like the use of the word sump and the discussion of basement versus garage. Like I have a basement, I have a rear tuck under garage. And it's the same grade as my basement.
Yes.
Is that what we're talking about here? Are we actually talking about the basement and the garage being on different grades?
So a requirement is that if MSD does allow a sump garage, which is a basement garage, so they're saying it relies on sump pump, then they don't allow the garage to be at the same elevation as your basement level, because the garage essentially acts as the ponding area if there was a storm event. So what they're trying to do is say the garage, because it's below grade in the driveway that collects so much water during an event, they don't want that water to hit the same level as their sewer inlet drain that's in your basement, because then that's just going to overflow their sewer even more because of how much water would be collected through that. So they want to make sure they're at different levels. So if your garage floods, it doesn't flood your basement and then also get into their sewer inlets, which are at a higher elevation.
Okay, so it sort of sounded like they were like worried about protecting my garage, but they're worried about that because they don't want the garage to flood into the basement, which connects to their
Yep,
system.
they don't want to flood into the basement and they don't want it to flood into their sewer area inlet, drain inlet.
Okay. And it does collect a lot of water.
And then the last one that we've added is the overland flow path. So again, as I kind of referenced earlier, when we talk about volume, That's something that is most feasible for us to address on our smaller sites that we have in our residential areas. But the important part is then to look at your overland flow path, because when we're addressing volume, again, we're still going to have, during those peak storm events, we're going to have surface flow, and it's going to go over the property lines. So one other recommendation is pulling from that idea of the knowing that your sump or your dry well is going to be running, especially your dry well is going to probably reach capacity during a high storm event, which means that all of, it's not collecting any water during the storm event. So the idea there is to design a buffer area, which can act as kind of a micro detention area. So almost like a small rain garden or some sort of depression at grade. That's directly where that overflow of the pop-up is going to go before it hits the property line. That would act as a mini peak flow mechanism there that would slow it during a larger storm event. To, again, the volume of water is still likely to eventually cross the property line, but hopefully it will slow it a little bit during those peak events. And it wouldn't be designed to be a full retention basin, which would be significantly larger. So it's almost like the reverse of a speed bump. It'll just be a small little ravine.
So that's the only piece that addresses peak flow for the smaller properties. Is keeping it,
Right.
right?
That's really the only way you're going to do it, is if you have some sort of detention area. So having some sort of micro detention area is what we're recommending at this point. We didn't change any of the recommendations on how you would actually design the sump pump. That's pretty much, we felt that we really did, the consultants took us in the right direction the first time there, and we didn't have a lot of questions about sump pumps previously, other than what we've addressed on the previous slide. And then for dry wells, we added a few more. So we wanted to have our design goals for the actual capture. So the 90th percentile, we'll be able to reference as we adopt these, all of the MSD guidelines. So they'll know exactly what that 90th percentile rain capture is. And then another guideline that we've added in here is to really encourage the use of multiple dry well locations or multiple discharge points that avoid the saturation. And again, will allow for multiple overland flow paths. So in the event of a higher storm, if your dry well fills up, instead of all of the water from the entire roof of a new house being led to one overflow pop-up emitter, we would have multiple to try and disperse the flow across a larger area. So the next steps are to actually draft the text amendment. Everything you've seen on the previous slides is going to impact multiple chapters, articles, sections of our code right now. Some of this is within chapter 405, which is our zoning regulations. So there'll be some amendments to our definitions, to our process and requirements and triggers for site plan review, and then to our actual coverage regulations within our zoning districts. Similarly, in chapter 410, where we've got some urban design districts, we will modify the lot coverage in those. And then in chapter 430, where we have stormwater control and land disturbance requirements, we will modify that to, instead of just generally referencing some MSD guidelines, we'll start to pull in some of those specific design guidelines and post-construction maintenance requirements. That's it.
Great. Thanks, Anna, very much. I don't know about everybody else, but I look forward to trying to understand that a little bit more. And then we'll move on. I think Chief's going to give us.
Just one question.
Sure.
I was curious about how existing properties that exceed the guidelines we're gonna put in will be handled when they have like, if obviously I assume they're like grandfathered in their current state, but like if they want to do something in the future, what do we allow them to like maintain the level that they have? Or
So it would, under our non-conforming protections, it would depend on what they were doing and what protection they trigger for that. So if they're, doing an addition or pulling out a house, or if they're removing a driveway and they're going to put in a new driveway, there's different protection levels depending on replacement, expansion, et cetera.
Okay.
So they wouldn't necessarily say, oh, my house right now covers 60% of the lot and I'm going to tear that down and build a new house so I get to then have 60% of the lot. No, the new house would have to conform.
Okay.
But there are some smaller protections depending on different scenarios that
Okay.
they might have under the.
But like a
non-conforming.
tear down would trigger, or like a really significant change is
Right.
more likely to trigger compliance with the new guidelines.
Yeah,
Is that
or
correct?
a minor change. I mean, so we can, when we come back with a text amendment, I can provide you some examples of different ones that would come, but there's essentially, if you're removing or relocating your non-conforming feature of your property, it has to go back to meet the current regulations.
Thanks.
So for example, if you have two driveways and one's a little bit higher intentionally to run into the neighbor's driveway, if they ever replace that driveway or expand it, is that something where you could enforce these things?
Likely, yes. So I would, depending on how we write these, we'll look at it. I don't know if that driveway would necessarily trigger some of the new requirements I have in here today, unless they were discharging some pop-up emitters on to that slanted driveway to then get to their neighbor's property.
Okay, and is there any, I guess whenever, is there any way to make sure that neighbors' concerns are, I guess neighbors get noticed and everything else and have a chance to make comments if somebody's doing certain types of developments. But I think that's probably really important with stormwater. You hear the backyard neighbors saying, you know, what's going on? They can't do that, yet they never figure out how to get that voice or that concern looked into.
Okay.
So I hope as we look at that, we stay aware of that as well.
Okay.
So, and I guess, so this is really for going forward, and right sizing is going to be a much bigger challenge because we don't have the ability to get in and change existing structures, right?
Right.
Okay. Right, thank you. Sooner the better.
I just have one clarification question.
Sure.
I see we're talking about changing R2, R3, R4, and R5, but I also saw the Morelands as an R6, but I didn't see it accounted for.
Yes, so I think I'd probably just left it on the slide, but all those higher multifamilies right now, we're just leaving them as is.
Okay,
That's what
thank-
we're proposing. Yep. And in the neighborhood analysis, we're also looking at percentage of building footprint on a lot and overall size, square footage. So those will come in the next level. Yep.
All right, Chief, we're ready for you. Sorry.
Very
about
good. Good evening. Thanks for having me here today, and here to talk about the Blue Shield grant. We were just awarded funds from that grant. I'm going to explain how we plan on spending those funds. Also, we had some questions come up about the flock safety, the license plate recognition database. So I'm here to talk about that as well. Anna, are you controlling the PowerPoint for me? Thank you. First of all, just to recap on the Blue Shield grant, the Missouri Department of Public Safety established this program earlier in the year. Law enforcement agencies meeting the grant standards are eligible for grant funding. That included community policing initiatives, proactive policing practices, data-driven policing strategies, technology-based strategies, collaborative and specialized units, and also a resolution which you passed on May 13th supporting our involvement in this program. Next slide. So in July, we were notified that the Clayton PD was awarded $50,000 for this grant, which was more than we expected. However, the deadline to submit a grant proposal is September 2nd. We had about 2 months to figure out how we're going to spend this money. So that's next Tuesday. Some of the allowable items to use with the fund were license plate readers, mobile data terminals, which are in-car computers, body-worn cameras, body armor, dash cams, security and surveillance systems, gunshot detection systems, justice information sharing technology, communication systems, hardware and software. One of the things we saw there that could be a need for us were surveillance systems, camera systems in public spaces. And if you show the next slide here, we've been discussing this for 10 years. It just never come to fruition, mainly because of funding. That's a picture from our command post during Ferguson when in November of 2014, we were preparing for the grand jury announcement over here at the Justice Center. The FBI provided us with 30 cameras, public space cameras, and we saw the value in having those cameras and deterring crime, recording activity, because at that time we were under threat of civil unrest and domestic terrorism. Fortunately, none of that stuff happened here, but we had those 30 cameras and they were very useful resource. So in the last 10 years, we've been discussing getting cameras in public spaces. We just never had the funding. Next slide, please. So in big cities, you see public safety cameras are pretty common. On the left there, you see St. Louis City. That's a common site there, that system, 2 cameras that has the arch and the city badge on it. You'll see that in downtown, Central West End, other neighborhoods, areas where high pedestrian traffic or high crime. The picture on the left, that's in Baltimore. I took that when I was in my conference earlier this month. That's a historic cathedral, but they had some public space cameras there. When I was sightseeing, just took a picture of that. But you go to Chicago, New York, any big city, you're going to see those cameras. They've had them for a long time. Next slide. But some of our neighboring cities that, even smaller cities than us have public space cameras. That image on the left, that's Maplewood. That's at Sutton and Manchester, the Blue Duck restaurant. Maplewood has cameras up and down their Manchester business district, and they have agreements with private property owners to install their cameras on the property. The image on the right, that's outside of Vintage Vinyl on the Delmar Loop. U City Police, they have cameras on the Delmar Loop. So it's not uncommon, smaller cities to have these cameras in vibrant downtown areas. Next slide, please. So we do have a lot of coverage with private cameras. And I had my detectives send me some images of recent cases where cameras in the public space help solve crimes. That image on the left, that was a suspect who was stalking women in Shaw Park. We were able to get his image off an apartment building here. Below, you can see in the bottom part there, that's a redacted image of the victim. He was following her that close from Shaw Park into downtown Clayton to her apartment building. Having that image, we're able to share that with other law enforcement agencies and identify that suspect. We're eventually able to catch up to him and arrest him at another park in St. Louis County, stalking a woman there. The image is in the middle. That's from our recent robbery in Old Town back in July. Those images are high quality from a couple buildings here in town, Beamiston Place and the M1 Bank. So those images, like I said, they have a lot of detail there. Once we had those images, we knew we would find these suspects. We put those on social media and the news media. Within a couple hours, we were getting tips on who they were, and we positively identified them. The image on the right, that's actually from the Clayton PD cameras. We do have cameras around our facility. That suspect was breaking into the Barry Waymiller building when it was under construction, stealing construction equipment. He didn't realize he was next to a police building. So to his surprise, when he got arrested, that he was committing burglaries, and we took that personally, but we found him. We were able to use those images to identify him and his truck. We were able to put his truck into the flock system, identify and find him out of town. Next image, please. And again, here's some examples of public space cameras owned by private companies. That's the Beamiston Place. Those 2 red circles are the cameras that captured the robbery suspects. The one on the right, that's the Commerce Bank building at Forsyth Point. What's interesting about that camera, last art fair, we had one of our officers get assaulted by an intoxicated person, and that camera right there captured the assault, and we were able to use that in prosecution. Next image, please. So this map right here shows some of the areas where we have private cameras on our public spaces. It's not all encompassing. That's just some of the cameras that we've used recently. There'll be the areas shaded in that pink beige kind of color. That's where we have coverage from private buildings. The ends are various crimes that have occurred in the last year and a half. Those are not all our calls. Those are actually reports that we've had. And then the white cameras, the blue outline, that's where we're proposing putting some public space cameras. And I'll go one by one and explain why we're doing them there. Why we're proposing that. At the camera on the far left, that would be at Brentwood and Forsyth. It's shaded along Brentwood there actually, but the Forsyth Point building only provides coverage of the sidewalk. We're going to have a lot of events there. We're already having events there for festivals. So it'd be nice to have some ability to monitor those activities when they occur. At Forsyth and Central, we get a lot of disturbance calls at the restaurants there at Chipotle and Starbucks. We've had some problems there with disturbances and assaults. If you go south of there, down the Central and Carondelet, right there is the parking lot for the Justice Center. We often get disturbance calls with people who are facing each other in court. You have divorce hearings, child custody hearings. Sometimes our parking ambassadors receive problems from people who are upset about getting tickets. So we've had issues there. We've also had, in the last 6 months, we've had 2 cars stolen from that lot from inmates released from the jail who walked into the lot and found cars with keys inside. So we'd like to provide some kind of coverage for the people coming to court, to come and visit Clayton, so they have some element of safety, and it'd probably be, I would hope, be a deterrent. Also, we're proposing putting a camera there at Central and Bonham and Merrimack and Bonham. We have a lot of foot traffic there because of the use of the Metrolink. And then finally, one right there at, right here at Bemis and Forsyth. We'd like to have some coverage where our city hall is to keep you all safe. And so next one. So we were looking at Flock safety cameras because they provide, it's a recent product. They're providing video cameras as well as the LPRs. We already have the Flock platform for the LPRs. It's installed on our computers. It will be seamless integration for us. That's what their cameras would look like. They're not cameras designed to attract a lot of attention like the ones you see in St. Louis City, often with flashing lights on them. Next slide, please. That gives you an idea. They are high quality, high resolution cameras. If you can put them at a wide angle like that, set them for a wide angle and you can get much of an intersection, or you can zoom in on them. Of course, if you're actually monitoring it in real time, you can zoom in and zoom out. Next slide, please. Some of the details. Annual price covers hardware, software, maintenance, and support. That's one of the attributes that makes Flock an attractive product. They handle all of the maintenance and setup for us. There are other companies out there, larger companies like Motorola and Genetec, but they sell you the service and then you have to find a third party to install it. These would be solar powered and are hardwired if there's electrical source there. Video sharing must be approved by Clayton PD. We're going to talk about the LPR sharing, but with this, I don't see a reason to share these videos with other agencies. If a crime is connected to something in Clayton, obviously they can come watch it, and we've done that with like our robbery case. We had the robbery in Old Town. Those suspects committed robberies in U City and Normandy, and we had video of the robbery in Normandy. So something like that, we want to work together and build a prosecution. The cameras are $3,000 per camera annually. The Blue Shield grant will cover 3 years of service with Flock for those cameras. Currently, like local cities using the Flock video are Creve Coeur, Ferguson, St. Peters, and Wentzville. I would anticipate that that's going to increase with this Blue Shield. Other cities are looking to use these funds for this purpose. So I went through that kind of quickly for you. Anybody have questions about what we're trying to accomplish here?
Yeah, I do. So, well, for the first question with the Justice Center, who's responsible for monitoring that parking lot?
Well, we are.
So the county.
That's
So-
our jurisdiction. I talked to the captain in charge of security services, and they do have an old system. They have surveillance cameras around their facilities, around the PD building, the courts, the admin building, but it doesn't reach out into the parking lot, and they have no plans to upgrade that or add more.
That
But
falls
so
on
we
us.
do
Okay.
the enforcement there, and just like if a crime occurs inside the jail, an inmate assaults another inmate, we have to do that investigation.
Okay, and then if the grant covers, you said 3 years, what is the contract period?
Oh, it'd be 3 years.
Be a 3-year contract, and
Yeah.
then we decide if we renew. whatever.
We did it so it'd be 50,000 total. So we got into that.
And then the question, of course, of privacy issues, who actually, you said that the video sharing must be approved by Clayton PD. Where is that housed? Who has it? Who manages the data? How do you?
It'd
Okay.
be up in the cloud kind of thing. And so we would only have, our officers would have access to it. And we would, if somebody requested to see it, we would have to grant them access.
But Flock. Okay, it's totally within the control of the Clayton PD.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Thanks. I think everybody, I don't know that you got a chance because I didn't send it until last night. But I shared information that I learned about at the conference I was at about a month ago. And Chief Smith was gracious to spend time with me over last week to talk in a little more detail about the Flock system. And so one thing that you may all realize is we're not actually being asked to approve this, and we don't have to, right? This is just for discussion. And I'm not suggesting that we don't do it. But one of the things about this that's different from our existing LPRs is that it isn't automatically hooked up into a network that other agencies can access.
Right.
Right? And so I know we're close to time for our regular meeting to start. But the concerns about the flock LPR, I think are something that we should discuss as a board, make time for that. Cause I think what I learned, like the short story of my takeaway was that, the nature of the way that Flock has established the network and sharing, options, makes it challenging for us to ensure that the policies and practices that our department puts in place and adheres to, are sufficient to protect the data once we put it into that network, right? So, there are things that I think we could do to investigate, like what is our radius and who are we auto approving to look at our stuff? And then, and like audit, what kind of searches are people doing of our data and what kind of justification are they providing and what do we think about that? And we can make some decisions.
I have an update. As far as the federal government concerned, apparently, I don't know if you saw the news, Flock has halted their program, their data sharing with Homeland Security and Border Protection Services because of concerns that you brought up. I guess they're receiving a lot of feedback like this.
Okay.
So right now they're I'll send you the article.
Yeah.
I saw it on ABC. It popped up. One of those things on social media now, how they're spying on us. So it's popped up this morning. So they are not going to follow through with they had a pilot program where they were going to monitor fentanyl and human trafficking kind of thing. And that's what Homeland Security does. However, because of concerns being brought up, they're going to pause that and try to figure out a way to, make sure there's, privacy is honored there. And then also with the federal agencies, they're not going to be able to do a blanket search anymore. They're going to have to do one-on-one search. So if they want our data, they got to search specifically Clayton or wherever they're going. So that would, because I think one of your big concerns was the blanket searches, correct?
Yeah, a little bit. And then I think it's the other thing is that like we have this retention period that we put in place, but the system allows anyone with access to our network to download the data. And I just think that in our current environment, it's actually, like it's not far-fetched to imagine that there are agencies, local agencies in our own state and neighboring counties that would be very happy to support the administration's goals of creating this one big beautiful database with all kinds of data on it. And so I just think that's something we need to think about and talk about more and understand how it aligns with like the protections that we think we put in place and that our department is adhering to, but the system might allow mechanisms for that to be basically bypassed.
I mean, given the time constraints, maybe if anybody has any questions for Chief Smith related to just the cameras in downtown. And then if we want to talk about just flock cameras specifically or not, I mean, the flock system, I guess, we can just put that on a different discussion time or?
We could do that. Or if you have, I know you have a list of specific questions that I think other cities have used and some things you learned at that conference. We could also approach it where we go ahead and put together that list. Let's ask those questions, see what kind of answers we get back, and then hold the discussion when we can answer some of those.
But if I may,
Because a lot of those we probably won't be able to address right now.
I did speak to a Flock rep today about your concern, and she thought that was an interesting concern about the ability to download and circumvent the safeguards in place. And she's going to bring that up to her support team.
That's great.
So I do see that, with Flock, their technology, the accountability they put in place is evolving, right, as they catch up to the
absolutely.
technology. So I think
Yeah.
Fantastic. yeah.
The-
Yeah.
Great.
Were you looking for some action from the board to authorize the use of grant funds?
I just think it was just an effort to be transparent, so you understand why we're doing this, why we're putting this in place.
You're doing it.
Yeah.
Right.
We intend to apply for this. Now, there's still a contract that would need to be approved later, but this would be the initial application. Unless the board looked at this and said, absolutely not, we don't want to go down this path, then we'll put together something else. But our intention is to do this. And again, there was a quick turnaround, and that's why we're just kind of putting this out there that, hey, this is what we intend to utilize the funding for.
So I just have a question in terms of, since you are going to make the application, in terms of how we intend to use this, and where I'm coming from is additional costs that might be incurred to use it. So you showed a picture of what I would describe active monitoring during the Ferguson situation. And I'm thinking that normally we would use this in more of a post-event kind of, okay, something happened, let's go back and check it. So I'm just wondering if we intend to have, allocate personnel to actively watch these cameras, especially during, like, let's say an art fair or some other big event.
So during the art fair, we actually do have a command post, similar to what you saw for Ferguson. We have a command post at the police department with fire and police, and there would be people there monitoring that. And so right now, for like this art fair coming up here, we have access to two security trailers. The towers, they had them at the Taste of St. Louis event. There was 4 of them there. So we'll have access to those. But in the future, if we get these cameras, we're going to be able to watch them from our command post.
Okay, but we won't need in order to make this work, to on a routine basis, actively monitor this or staff it.
I mentioned U City and Maplewood, they don't. Now, we do have an officer in the station who we call him our patrol services officer. He handles people who come in for reports, walk-in reports, handles booking and processing. He would have the ability to do that, if during his downtime, but 24/7, that probably wouldn't happen. But during events like the Jazz Fest and the Art Fair, we would monitor.
Jeff, do you have any questions? Great. Chief, I think it's a great idea. I think that's one of the reasons people love it here is they feel safe. So I'm certainly in favor of moving forward with the grant application. So
Thank you.
thank you for the presentation,
Sure.
and then we'll talk more about flock cameras as needed moving forward.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, great. So it is after 7 o'clock, so we will start our 7 o'clock meeting. If the city clerk could call the roll.
Alderwoman Buse,
Here?
Alderwoman Patel,
Here.
Alderman Fader,
Here.
Alderman Hummel,
Here.
Alderman York,
Here.
Mayor McAndrew,
Here.
City Manager Gibson.
Here.
City Attorney O'Keefe.
Here.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if anybody's online, but this is the time in our meeting where if there's anybody that's here to address us about something that's not on the agenda, they can address us now. Looks like there's nobody online, so we will go forward. The first item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Does anybody have any comments or questions on the consent agenda? All right, Alderwoman Buse.
I move that the board approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Great, any discussion?
Alderwoman Buse,
Aye.
Alderwoman Patel,
Aye.
Alderman Fader,
Aye.
Alderman Hummel,
Aye.
Alderman York,
Aye.
Mayor McAndrew.
Aye.
Thank you.
Great. Well, as part of that consent agenda, we approved the August 5th, 2025 election results. So that means we get to swear in a new Ward 3 alderperson. So.
You didn't take it.
Family picture? Yay. Take your seat, yeah. Welcome.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
It's the same, yeah.
Okay, so we'll be calling the roll again. Alderwoman Patel. I'm sorry. Alderwoman Buse.
Here.
Alderwoman Patel.
Here.
Alderman Fader.
Here.
Alderman Hummel.
Here.
Alderman York.
Here.
Alderwoman Waldman.
Here.
Mayor McAndrew.
Here.
City Manager Gibson.
Here.
City Attorney O'Keefe.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, great. So the next item on our agenda is a CUP for Zensai Coffee at 8121 Maryland. I will open the public hearing and request proof of publication.
Yes, this is a public hearing to consider an application for a conditional use permit submitted on behalf of Zenzia Coffee LLC to allow for the operation of a 1,200 square foot restaurant with an outdoor dining area. The subject property is on the north side of Maryland Avenue, between North Forsyth Boulevard and North Brentwood Boulevard. It is zoned C1 Neighborhood Commercial District and is located in the Maryland Gateway Overlay District. Zenzia Coffee Shop will be open 7 days a week from 6 a.m. until 8 p.m. They have 45 indoor seats and 8 outdoor seats. There is no off-street parking requirement for restaurants in the CBD that are less than 3,000 square feet, so that waiver would apply here. The deliveries will be in the alley, and they will use existing recycling and garbage pickup in the rear alley at the strip center there. The Plan Commission considered this request at its meeting on August 18th, 2025, and voted unanimously to recommend approval, and staff recommends approval as well.
Great, thank you. I'll open the discussion. Does anybody have anybody up here have any questions or comments? I don't know if the applicant's here.
Yeah, my only comment was, the applicant was at the Plan Commission and very well received, and everyone was excited for the shop to get open. It seems well thought through and attractive, and had the support there, so.
Great. Was there any, are they a franchise or, I mean, was there any?
Yeah, it was I think it's a single business, bringing in, David, help me, was it Colombian coffee, specialized coffee?
Yeah, they were direct
Yeah.
importing coffee from Colombia that's fresh. They said by the time it's picked and shipped and then roasted and served, it's usually within 14 days.
Yeah,
So-
so this is quite
Very
exciting.
interesting.
Sounds very good.
Yes, great.
I'm personally hopeful that they use the amount of time that they have like requested to be open. Because it's actually really hard to find coffee shops open before 7 or 8 that are very good. So love to see a 6 a.m. or 6:30 open time.
Alderman Fader, any comments or questions?
My wife thinks I don't do anything except go to have coffee with people, so
It's
probably,
another place.
probably,
Yeah.
probably true. So I'm very happy to have another place to add to the list. So welcome.
Good, great.
No questions.
I may have missed this, but Susan, the planning commission, they talk about, are they providing food? Do they have a plan? Because it sounds like they want to stay open later at night, and I'm not a coffee drinker, but that seems late to just serve coffee like.
I don't recall an extensive
talking
food
that-
menu at all. no.
Okay,
It looked like they were gonna apply for a liquor permit, like they were gonna.
Yeah, there was potentially going
You
to do
have
that.
plans to have some food elements and probably come in for a liquor license at some point,
gotcha, okay,
similar to what Ivy Cafe did.
okay.
All right, great. I will, nobody online, right? No. I will close the public hearing. Alderwoman Buse.
Okay. I move that the board approve resolution number 2025-23, granting a conditional use permit for Zenzia Coffee located at 8121 Maryland Avenue.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, great. Do we know when they're opening? Did they give any sort of timeline?
Very soon.
Oh,
They,
wonderful.
yep, they just needed this approval for their occupancy permit.
Good, great. All right, sounds
The
great.
website, I
Sounds
know the
like-
website's up because I had to look it up. So the website's up and running.
To find out from Gary if there's a ribbon cutting scheduled. All right, so we'll move into the city manager's report. The next item on our agenda is related to our new municipal garage project, and it's a contract for the general contractor.
Yes, this is exciting. This is a big one that we've been waiting for. So project is moving right along and we're ready for construction. So on June 30th, 2025, Navigate Building Solution, our owner's representative, issued an invitation to bid for the Clayton Municipal Maintenance Facility Addition and Renovation Project, which is located at 8300 Shaw Park Drive. For anyone that's not familiar, the municipal maintenance facility is our Public Works and Parks Operation Building. There were 6 bids opened on August 13th, 2025, and the Lawrence Group LLC, doing business as Integrate Construction Partners, submitted the lowest responsive responsible base bid in the amount of $11,700,000, plus add alternate 7 in the amount of $10,000, for a total of $11,710,000. That add alternate number 7, which is establishing a unit cost and size for dewatering containment, which was a recommendation or a requirement that was provided after our soils report came in from that engineer. The Lawrence Group, doing business as Integrate, submitted a timeline for the project with a total construction duration of 392 days. So we knew this would take a little over a year to construct. Their timeline is right on target with that. There are additional procurement activities, so more things we'll need to buy here in the near future that are all accounted for in the program budget. That includes exterior signage, interior signage, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, or FF&E, as you'll hear us refer to it. There's some low voltage scope of work, so that's data type things within the building, and then temporary city staff accommodations during the construction phase. All of those costs, again, are included in the total program budget, but have not been procured to date. The total cost for this work is consistent with the total program budget that was presented to the Board of Aldermen during a design development update on April 18th, 2025. That budget estimated the construction cost with contingencies at $11,861,625. So we were within $50,000, $50,000 over that estimate. That's including all the contingencies. So really, really close there. It's amazing to me that on a project of this size, you can be within 0.5% on a cost estimate, but really glad to see the bids come in where they did. So in addition to that contract amount, that 11.7 million, we are requesting authorization to approve change orders in an amount not to exceed $200,000, a contingency amount, to address any unforeseen conditions that may arise during construction in the existing operational facilities. So we've got a little bit of a cushion there within the construction contract. Staff recommends that the Board of Aldermen approve the ordinance authorizing the contract with Lawrence Group, doing business as Integrate Construction Partners, in an amount of $11,710,000, plus a contingency of $200,000 for the Clayton Municipal Maintenance Facility project. And with us this evening is our owner's rep, Joe Schweitzer with Navigate Building Solutions, and we also have Matt Malik, our Director of Public Works, here.
Great, thank you. I will open the discussion. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Matt or Navigate?
Just a general, just the start date and more importantly, when will these things most significantly impact us in terms of either dislocation or operations?
So we're already impacted as far as the relocation is concerned. We've moved. We've been moving over the last few weeks. Most of that is complete. If you remember, we had all the remediation work, the initial stuff that we approved 2 meetings ago, maybe, that has to take place before construction can commence. So the disruption's already there. We're scattered. Parks is operating over at Oak Knoll Park. There's a small maintenance building there. Public Works has individuals that are now reporting to 10 South Brentwood, which is the police building. We have those upper floors. And so we're scattered at this point. So that's already begun. As far as the start date for Integrate, I don't know how close we have that dialed in at this point. It'd be a question for Matt or Joe.
David, the school district's providing some Haven too, or what are they
That's correct.
like
That's-
storage? So the school district's
At
providing.
Hayfield, they're
At
giving
Hayfield
us,
too,
yeah.
so-
Yeah, they've been very
Very nice.
accommodating over
Yeah.
there. It's been nice. We'll get a schedule once we get an executed contract. However, preliminary discussions sound like we're probably looking at closer into October before they actually get rolling. It's going to depend on some lead time items and how they structure their schedule so that they don't have any downtime, but we're probably at least a month out before construction beginning. Earnest on site.
Just want to make sure that that's working in terms of what you had anticipated, especially regarding weather. I mean, I remember we talked about timing and that could affect things. So is this a best case scenario, worst case scenario? How is it playing out?
Oh, the more it pushes, yeah, it's great. It's closer to getting snow plows and spreaders on and leaving them for the year. But no, theirs are still hanging over there. And I think the reality is, and we accounted for this in the budget, is we're going to have to accommodate a temporary installation location for those spreaders, which is one of the things we just haven't moved off the site yet. But that'll be something we'll sort out and we'll make work. I don't have any concerns with that. It's just the last big heavy thing we've left on site right now.
Okay.
Just confirmation, the $200,000 is cumulative, right? So cumulative, we need change orders above that, then you'd come back to us. Is
That's
that how I
correct.
read
That's
the
an
resolution?
aggregate amount.
Okay. The other question is just on, have we built in any sort of clawbacks, or how do we deal with the fact if they just take way longer than we expect them to get it done? Like, I know my presumption is we're paying them over time, so it's not that we're gonna outlay all this money, but let's say they take a year and a half, 2 years to do this. Like, is there some mechanism by which to either claw money back or anything like that, so this doesn't become a,
They have to
Nicole?
perform, there's liquidated damage provisions
Okay.
in the contract. So if they go past a certain point, then you can start to charge them.
Okay.
For the
Yeah.
overage.
Daily, right?
okay, thanks.
Alderwoman Waldman, do you have any questions? I'm assuming there's nobody online. All right, Alderwoman Buse.
I move the board, I introduce bill number 7087, approving a contract with the Lawrence Group LLC, doing business as Integrate Construction Partners, to be read for the first time by title only.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. City Attorney?
Bill number 7087, first reading. An ordinance approving a contract with the Lawrence Group LLC doing business as Integrate Construction Partners for general contractor and construction services related to the Clayton Municipal Maintenance Facility project.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Move the board give unanimous consent to consideration for adoption of bill number 7087 on the day of its introduction.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Let the minutes reflect that the board has given unanimous consent.
I introduce bill number 7087, approving a contract with the Lawrence Group LLC, doing business as Integrate Construction Partners, to be read for the second time by title only.
Second.
Discussion? Mr. City Attorney?
Bill number 7087, second reading and consideration for adoption. An ordinance approving a contract with the Lawrence Group LLC doing business as Integrate Construction Partners for general contractor and construction services related to the Clayton Municipal Maintenance Facility project.
Alderwoman Buse,
Aye.
Alderwoman Patel,
Aye.
Alderman Fader,
Aye.
Alderman Hummel,
Aye.
Alderman York,
Aye.
Alderwoman Waldman, Mayor McAndrew.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, the next item is another agreement that's needed for our new municipal facility.
Yes, this is an agreement with a piece of ground there. It's a 15-foot wide easement that we're requesting from them. This is on the west side of the building there. If you've been out to the site, we've showed this area where we have a retaining wall. There's a fence over there. We also need to access this area for construction purposes. It's on a hillside owned by State Metro. We want to get a permanent easement there. So again, we can access it during construction. We have a retaining wall and some other items in that particular area. They don't use that particular hillside for any real purpose. So they're willing to grant us the easement. This ordinance would put that permanent easement in place. And again, this facilitates the construction and long-term use of the maintenance facility. We recommend approval.
I'll open the discussion. Does anybody have any questions or comments with respect to the
I
easement?
had one, like, I mean, did they have they could have said no,
Yes,
right?
they could have,
So,
yes.
yeah, okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah, just, David and I had a chance to talk about this, but now I've got more questions. So I can't remember. Is there still, there is or isn't a Metrolink line there? Or is it just the highway?
This is right next to the highway. This would be on the west side of the property.
Okay, so for the first question is there any cost? Did we have to pay any meaningful consideration for this?
No.
And are we assuming any liabilities, like if that were to slide, like we have to retain it in a certain condition so that, I just wonder if we have any responsibilities to Bi-State.
So the line next to it, the area that was there, that's the GRG trail, correct? That is at the top of that particular slope. From a maintenance standpoint in the agreement,
I didn't see anything.
yeah, I don't think there's anything. It just allows us to access it. They would still need to. There's Matt.
Yeah, it's along the highway and the old rail and GRG trail. There are some Ameren lines that run overhead that are in their, I believe their own separate easement, but the portion we're getting an easement for isn't an exclusive easement, and the language of the document doesn't carry any maintenance responsibilities with it.
Okay. Yeah, I remember walking the site and seeing the need for this and accepting that. I just want to make sure we aren't assuming some unknown liability for a mudslide and replacing the trail and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And we're gonna build just to, so we're actually gonna build on the easement, or we just need the easement to like move trucks and
It's-
stuff around?
It's moving things around, allowing for some hardscape work potentially, but buildings and such, no, those remain fully on the property. Yep.
All right, Alderwoman Buse.
I'll introduce Bill number 7088, approving an easement agreement with Bi-State Metro related to the municipal garage project, to be read for the first time by title only.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. City Attorney?
Bill number 7088, first reading, an ordinance approving execution of a permanent easement agreement with Bi-State Development Agency related to the Clayton Municipal Maintenance Facility Project at 8300 Shaw Park Drive.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Alderwoman Buse?
I move that the board give unanimous consent to consideration for adoption of Bill number 7088 on the day of its introduction.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Let the minutes reflect that the board has given unanimous consent. Alderwoman Buse?
I introduce Bill number 7088, approving an easement agreement with Bi-State Metro related to the municipal garage project, to be read for the second time by title only.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. City Attorney?
Bill number 7088, second reading and consideration for adoption. An ordinance approving execution of a permanent easement agreement with Bi-State Development Agency related to the Clayton Municipal Maintenance Facility Project at 8300 Shaw Park Drive.
Alderwoman Buse,
Aye.
Alderwoman Patel,
Aye.
Alderman Fader,
Aye.
Alderman Hummel.
Aye.
Alderman York,
Aye.
Alderwoman Waldman,
Aye.
Mayor McAndrew,
Aye.
sorry.
The next item on the agenda is a change order for our 10 South Brentwood Boulevard garage.
Yes, this is the gift that keeps giving over there. We started this as just a coating project. We just wanted to put a new surface on the deck. We knew there would be a few partial depth repairs where we'd have to repair some concrete. If you remember, we opened this up and the more they dug around, the more they realized we had extra work that needed to be done related to the concrete, but also found a number of post-tension cables that had to be repaired. That work's about 85% complete at this point, but we've run into a large number of cables, continue to find these things as we move along. So we approved a change order for that initial or that additional work related to the cable repairs about a month ago. That change order was for $147,000. The initial contract was 175, so we added 147 plus with the first change order. We have about another 70,000 or more in work that needs to be done. we're asking for $75,000 to complete the work. About 71 or so is the estimate. It gives us a little bit of a cushion, so hopefully we don't have to come back to the Board of Aldermen for a third time, if we run into anything else. We don't think we will because they're about 85% of the way done, but as the staff report mentions, there were 12 additional cables that need to be replaced, so we need to take care of these structural items. But one of the other items that we're adding to this project is a corrosion inhibitor. What we found is there's a really high concentration of chloride that's in this concrete, and that's what's helping eating away these cables quicker than you would otherwise have. So in order to prevent that, we've added just under $17,000 for that corrosion inhibitor that will hopefully maintain or at least prolong the life of that garage deck as we repair it. So this change order number 2, again, we're asking for $75,000. We would pay for that out of the capital improvement fund. This money has not been appropriated, so it would be in the next budget amendment. We do have the cash available to go ahead and pay for this, but we would need to appropriate more money at the end of the year to cover the expense. So all in all, the project has gone from $175,000 to just under $400,000 with the number of repairs that we've had to make. But again, they are structural in nature, so we recommend that they be done. So we do recommend approval of the ordinance, and Matt Malik, our Public Works Director, is here if you have any questions about the work.
I'll open the discussion. So stuff like that is why we're doing material testing when we're laying the cement in our new municipal garage, so that we don't have cement that has high concentrations of, what was in it?
Chloride.
Chloride. So, does anybody have any questions or comments?
I was just gonna say, I appreciate the investigation and like identification of the root cause so that we can try to mitigate it going forward. That's great.
I think there's a movie, Mr. Blanding's Dream House, where you start spending money and then you keep spending more. But all that being noted, it sounds like something we've had to do, so I have no objection.
I'm trying to remember. I knew that this was something we were going to do in phases. Is this project going to come back for another floor? What do we anticipate there? Or do we have an anticipation?
I'd have to ask Mr. Malik if.
And then
We're
when
gonna have a
you
repeat.
address that, Matt, I guess what I'm wondering is what's the useful life when we're done investing in this parking garage?
So the short answer, I don't have that number in front of me on the second floor repairs. They're not as extensive. It's more about the overhead. What happened on this garage is when the garage was built, best we could tell was the late 80s. We took it over in 2014. A coating had never been applied to the top surface, and salt had been applied over the years for treatment of snow. That allowed the chloride to get into the concrete and eat away. So we installed a liner in 2014 that was just due for repair again, and the rusting in the steel is what caused some of the concrete to pop. So the chloride or inhibitor is going to hopefully neutralize that aspect of it, and then we'd put this coating on that would be good hopefully for 10 years is the plan. Now we can do interim coatings, which aren't the full thickness of the coating. They should be cheaper coatings, kind of like microsurfacing versus mill and overlay on the streets. But the short answer is I was giving you a bunch of other information because I didn't have your original question first. Sorry, I don't know that budget number for the next phase.
Oh, okay. But we would anticipate it to be a considerable number in the hundreds of thousands of dollars?
No, it's not. It won't be as much as this one from what I recall. I think it was even lower than the original estimate for this project on the next phase of that.
Okay.
I can get that number for you, though. I apologize. I
That's
don't have
okay.
it.
I just wanted to anticipate how much this garage was going to cost us. That's all.
Understood.
It's the gold-plated garage. So Matt, just so I'm understanding, so what we think happened is that the chloride from the salt seeped into the concrete. So the idea of putting this inhibitor in is going to counteract basically what's left of the old salt. And then we're going to put a new cap on it to stop future salt from seeping in. Am I understanding this correctly?
The only thing I would add to that is future salt and moisture from activating with that salt or for activating with that chloride that's in the concrete.
Okay.
Yes. So that it'll
And
do
I know
both.
we haven't investigated yet, but on to with Rick's question, do we think there was a similar salt chloride infiltration problem on the other part of the deck that we're looking to do going forward?
No, it's covered and doesn't have, so it doesn't get treated in the wintertime.
Okay.
Yep.
So provided it was chloride issues, we probably don't have much of that to deal with. Presumably they didn't salt a bunch, and we know we haven't salted much of it.
Right. It'd be on your exposed sections, which are usually your top levels.
Okay, thank you.
Matt, I just can't recall, does anybody other than our police department, I mean, I know other agencies in that building, does anybody else use that garage? Like, for instance, like people who might lease it from Commerce or something like that?
We've had agreements over the years. I don't know that any are in place right now, but I think on occasion, it might be IT sometimes uses it, other equipment may get stored up there, but I think it's rarely used.
Right now, there are no users from other buildings. Everybody that parks there is actually in 10 South Brentwood. Up until last year, we had some Commerce Bank leases.
Okay.
And if you remember those in the past, but when they built Forsyth Point and they moved over there, they actually had more parking capacity. So
Okay.
they terminated the lease that they had with us.
And
We
it's
have a lot-
not public.
We have a lot of excess capacity there.
I'm sorry.
Do we have excess capacity there?
We probably have a little bit, not a whole lot, but right now with Public Works
Yeah.
operating out of the building,
Oh, yeah.
once that
Yeah.
deck is done, I wouldn't anticipate any capacity.
Yeah, us and the police
over
department and IT are clamoring for those spaces
Yep.
right now, so apologize to the PD again.
Is there, I assume the answer is no, but given that we kind of split an IT department, and if I remember right, the FBI may be there, is there any way to get some of this reimbursed by, in effect, the tenants or the other municipalities? It won't be a lot, but is there a way to recoup any of that?
There's nothing in the contract that would require the other cities to pay for any improvements
Okay.
here. And I did look that I don't have the 26 budget in front of me, but looking at the 5-year CIP, and I don't think we changed that amount. It was 95,000 for the next phase of the project. So hopefully that holds up.
Much better. Alderwoman Buse?
Introduce bill number 7089, approving a change order number 2 with Western Specialty Contractors for the garage repairs at 10 South Brentwood Boulevard, to be read for the first time by title only.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. City Attorney?
Bill number 7089, first reading, an ordinance approving a change order to the contract with Western Waterproofing Company Incorporated, doing business as Western Specialty Contractors for the eastern phase of the 10 South Brentwood third level parking garage repair project.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Alderwoman Buse?
I move that the board give unanimous consent to consideration for adoption of bill number 7089 on the day of its introduction.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Let the minutes reflect that the board is giving unanimous consent.
Introduce bill number 7089, approving a change order number 2 with Western Specialty Contractors for the garage repairs at 10 South Brentwood Boulevard, to be read for the second time by title only.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. City Attorney?
Bill number 7089, second reading and consideration for adoption. An ordinance approving a change order to the contract with Western Waterproofing Company Incorporated, doing business as Western Specialty Contractors for the eastern phase of the 10 South Brentwood third level parking garage repair project.
Alderwoman Buse,
Aye.
Alderwoman Patel,
Aye.
Alderman Fader,
Aye.
Alderman Hummel.
Aye.
Alderman York,
Aye.
Alderman Waldman,
Aye.
Mayor McAndrew.
Aye.
Thank you.
The last item on our agenda is putting Alderwoman Waldman on some committees, commissions, boards.
That's correct. The mayor has proposed 3 assignments. That would be to the Parks and Recreation Commission, Sustainability Advisory Committee, and Uniformed Employees Retirement Fund Board.
Anybody have any comments or questions on that?
Look forward to serving with you.
For the pensions.
Besmirch that. That is a very important, all right.
Alderwoman Buse?
Move to approve the appointment of Alderwoman Waldman as the aldermanic representative to the Plan Commission.
Oh, no.
I know this is wrong, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's okay. Sustainability Advisory Committee, Uniform Employees Retirement Fund Board, and Parks and Recreation Commission. We just wanted her to stay on the other one.
Second.
Thank you.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great. All right.
Congratulations.
Yep, we have come to the end of our agenda. Anybody wants to go around and just kind of highlight if there's anything significant that's happened to them in the last couple of weeks?
No? Pertaining to the board, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Pertaining to
Um,
committee or commission? that
Well,
you're
with the
on?
Sustainability Advisory Commission meeting, and there's some important issues going on, and staff and the committee are just, they're just so impressive. Lights Out campaign during the migration, and hopefully you all saw the banner out in front. It's twice a year in the spring and the fall as birds migrate through this path, and encouraging, well, the city participating and encouraging businesses. Any of you have contacts or are part of a business in a larger building, if you can help advocate for turning the lights out during that short period of time during the migration, it does make a huge, well, we don't want the impact. It makes a huge difference for our birds. We're also still working on the urban dark skies for Oak Knoll Park, run into some, some lighting issues that we'd hoped we'd gotten past. So still working on that. Fall recycling events coming up December 5th. And then I think we also talked about rolling out in the communications for the building performance standards that are coming up. I think, David, it's the first of the year we start rolling, people start coming online, and
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
putting together all the communications for the larger buildings.
and then there's also a plan commission meeting, and I'll let Alderman Waldman add to this when it comes around to her turn as well. Berry Box, which is a restaurant on Forsyth, has a sign that everyone's seen that was over our sign ordinance regulations that was approved by everybody. There's also discussion of it with the, as we talk about water and retention and everything else, we had a residence that was approved that that went to right to the impervious surfaces limits, and by doing things like doing the what's the striped driveway called? The ribbon driveway, and not having a path to recycling and things like that. So and no trees on the property. So I am very anxious to see us update for our neighborhood health these standards, that the ordinances that we have. And that's all I've got.
Thanks. I go ahead. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I wanted to say I've seen some sidewalk repair happening in Hillcrest and other areas out there. So thanks to, I assume that's Public Works for getting on that, making it safe as the tornado recovery continues. I went to a program about complete streets at Paraquad that was co-hosted by TrailNet, and there were City of St. Louis elected officials there. They were talking very specifically about like what the St. Louis City is trying to do as it relates. They have an official complete streets policy and how they're looking at that and what they're trying to implement. And they were looking to get feedback from Paraquad in particular about access issues that folks with different types of disabilities face, and trying to meet that. So that was great. I think we don't have a complete streets, or we do have a complete streets policy. We
We
do.
have a complete streets ordinance, yeah.
Ordinance.
Mhm.
All right, great. Thank you. And then Oak Knoll Music Nights was this past Sunday, and it was like the most beautiful. I mean, I always say it's one of the best places to be, even when it's really hot out, because it's a very like well-tempered park, I think, because of the environment and the trees and stuff. But the weather was so great. It was really wonderful, really well attended. And there was a special performance by two great egrets that were hanging out in the pond and in the trees and flying around, and it was just really nice. And then the last thing, and I've never asked about this, but it does seem kind of silly how we talk about our folks who write tickets as parking ambassadors. I'd love to find out what, like, if we've thought about changing that. So That's all.
Yeah, that would probably be a question for, well, Gary's not here
David,
either, but
yeah.
yeah, David, I don't know when things will
not-
get repainted.
I'm not making a motion. I just
Yes.
want to be
Yeah.
clear.
Good to know.
I'm just like, it just does sound silly.
Yes, yeah. Alderman Fader?
I noticed on my calendar that I think on August 26, 2021, I was brought into this group and,
Oh,
so it's my fourth anniversary, and I do want to say how much I appreciate the mayor being my partner in Ward 3 for almost 4 years, and how much I look forward to having Kami be part of this team. It's a lonely job when you're the only, representative, especially in a quiet summer where all we have is a tornado.
Right.
But anyway, we will have our first coffee together on September 13th, so look forward to that. Actually, by the way, I think I would say, since I've liked being here so much, I guess I'm kicking off my campaign tonight for reelection, even though I hope not to do anything, but I am kicking it off tonight. So look forward to getting reelected and being able to serve with you all. Robin and I went to the Taste of St. Louis a couple times on an evening and on a Sunday afternoon. I'm interested in how everybody who went, what everybody thought about it. But anyway, it was worth checking out. And I guess my bottom line, it's probably worth doing it again. We went to the Festival of Nations, which is in Tower Grove Park, which was great. A couple of things. I think the mayor and David and I'm not sure anybody else from the board was there at the House Committee, the House Committee on Property Tax Reform, which was held last week at the center. And I think it was great that the City of Clayton hosted that. It was a massive crowd. I thought there would be 6 people there, and there were like 250. That was definitely standing room only. I think the very nature of the committee made the whole evening a little bit disorganized, because it was everything from people talking about Jake Zimmerman, talking about how St. Louis County does its assessments, to individuals getting up and talking about how their basement shouldn't have been included in their assessment. So when it's that wide-ranging a topic, it's pretty hard to know exactly what the point is. And that sort of leads into the last thing I wanted to mention. Was I attended, it's my second year on the County Municipal League, their legislative committee, which was this afternoon at Frontenac, where I saw Andrea, who says hi to everyone. She sat in. It's a well-run committee. Pat Kelly is executive director, and this time of the year is usually spent with trying to help the County Municipal League figure out what it should focus on in the upcoming legislative session. I think I heard today that there are like 600, almost 2,000 bills that are pre-filed. Almost none of them ever make it to the floor or make it all the way through to a vote, but this particular committee is actually following 600 of those to varying degrees. The big priority items, as it was last year, is always about tax and property tax, sales tax. The general sense, at least from this group, is that people in Jeff City really are not very concerned about what happens in the local communities, don't seem to care very much about how we raise revenue or what revenue sources we have. So there is the perennial bill. There will be bills to eliminate tax on foods, which would be devastating. Significant potential changes to property tax, it's even worse for our school district than for us, but certainly bad enough. And questions about how, if the Jeff City is thinking about getting rid of some taxes, what they're going to replace it with, what are going to be the revenue sources. Interesting as well, discussions about vaping and that whole issue of control over substances that are not marijuana. As I'm learning more every week, there are efforts at the county level to try to deal with this issue. There are also efforts at the state level to try to deal with these various products, hemp, the various Delta 8, Delta 9, all of these things. And I will say, I know a lot of people in Ward 3 are very interested in how we are going to respond in the next few weeks to how else we can regulate the particular establishment that's opened up on Clayton Road. So anyway, a very important committee, and I'm glad to be part of it. And I think by the end of the year, the idea is to pretty much give the league and its lobbyist, Mr. Dalton, a lot of direction on what things St. Louis County is most concerned about in the upcoming session. Oh, and the one final comment was a lot depends on what the county's planning, what the state is planning to do about redistricting. We know that the president has targeted Missouri as one of those states where he would like to see substantial redistricting. And the thought is in the next month, we will know probably where Jeff City is going to go on that. Will it follow that path? In which case, it will take a lot of the energy out of the room for everything else. So it's kind of good news and bad news, but we don't know yet exactly what will come with that. So anyway, a lot of important issues in Jeff City. Thanks.
Thank you.
Great. So Jeff and I both participated in a CRSWC meeting on August the 15th. And we had two major agenda items, and so I'm going to briefly review those. Both of them will be part of our joint meeting on September the 3rd. So I want to give you a couple of things to think about before we have that meeting. The first was a presentation or interaction we had with Opera Theater St. Louis. Nicole Freber and Andrew Jorgensen, who are directors of that organization, were there. And so what they shared with us is that they are going through the process of designing everything. They're still fundraising, and they are essentially approaching us to see if we are willing to consider parking. So they're short on specifics and just looking for flexibility. But what they do know are the following: that the theater that they want to construct would be have seating for 800 to 850 people. It would be available for year-round use. Their season is primarily from May 1st to July 15th, which is when they think the most intense use would take place. They're going to put 250 parking spots on their site. But they have a significant need for off-site parking. Currently, they're by Webster University, and they have access to over 1,400 spots from the university there, so they don't have an issue where they are there. What they would like is something in the range of 200 to 300 spots somewhere within the Clayton, center of Clayton footprint. And so we had the discussion, and I would expect that what we're going to end up having is some type of an iterative process. At this point, what they're looking for is a level of interest to see if we're willing to consider something, but they don't exactly know how to provide all the details. So we need to first establish that we have a level of interest. And then my goal would be that that we start thinking about the questions, conditions, limits, requirements, anything that we might have, so we can provide them some constructive feedback, and then they can take that and bring it back to us. So I would anticipate something like that going back and forth. Based on the feedback that I got from the school board members of the CRSWC, I think they're incredibly eager to make this happen in every possible way because they want access to the theater. So my point being, we may have different lenses in terms of who's using the parking lot, how intensely they're using the parking lot. And so we need to be prepared for that. I think there's a willingness to be creative and flexible. I just think we may have at times different perspectives. The big concern from the school standpoint is that the peak season may overlap with graduation and some of their ceremonies, so they've got some concerns about that. So the things to think about that just come to my mind would be, which lot or spaces, and can we even define those or make that available? And there are ways to address that, but that some may be less convenient to them to others. How might we monitor or control this? It became apparent that one of the members was very concerned that they want to make sure that parking is accommodated because they didn't want people parking in the neighborhoods to the north. And so that's another thing for consideration. We are worried about how this might affect center programming, especially on peak days. And so how do we address that? Their primary need generally is after 5 p.m., they say, but we don't know how they intend to use their facility and could they use it differently than what they're telling us right now. Do we want a formal agreement, an informal agreement? Do we want to provide this free to give them flexibility? That's essentially what they want because they're looking for reduction in costs so they don't have to build structured parking on their site. Or do we want to charge something for this? So lots of things to think about. Our goal at the meeting on September 3rd is merely to make sure that whether we, as a group, have interest in moving forward and then give them feedback and then give them questions. So I'd ask you to think about that. The second thing is we'll talk about the budget. The board of the CRSWC approved the budget. One of the big things that I would say that's in there relative to expectations are we've been involved in considerable marketing to drive additional membership. And we're not really meeting our plan, although that marketing initiative was somewhat delayed. So as we look at the budget, and again, I gave you these numbers last time, but our fiscal 25 budget projected a shortfall of $442,000. And right now, as we've gone through the year, we're looking at it being much less than that at about $250,000. And that's because of we had a number of personnel openings. The budget for 26 is going to project just shy of a $500,000 deficit. And you may recall that the school district representatives in the past have frequently wanted that number to continue to get closer to zero. And we are operating at a very high cost recovery relative to other centers. So we may have some friction on that. So anyway, I won't steal the thunder in terms of the other budget highlights. I'll let Tony and Val talk about those, but those are the major highlights.
One of the fun parts of following Rick when we serve on all the same committees is for the most part, Rick details everything before I get a chance to say anything, which is great. The only thing I would add, and I think we talked a little bit about this last time, is because I won't be there at the meeting next week because I'll be out of town, is the conversation that we need to start having is we all need to get on the same page as to, is it a community asset? How much we're willing to pay for it? Because I think the school district and the city need to slowly start getting used to the fact that if we want to keep this center, it's going to cost more every year because costs are going up, right? There's only so many people memberships we can sell, all of that. So, and I'm not sure if both boards are exactly on the same page as to how they view it, but it's something that I think the conversation needs to start percolating up in a more distinct way than maybe we have in the past, because as you'll learn more when we talk about the budget next week, like our budget here, costs are just going up faster than we can create revenue for that, given the rates we charge and the market we sit in. So we're going to get to the point where it's going to just cost us more every year, and we're either okay with that or we're not. And I think having that conversation and starting that with the school district will be helpful to figure out, 3-4 years down the line, what we have to kind of figure out. So otherwise, it's all the only other thing I'd add other than what Rick kind of talked about.
Thank you. Keeney, do you want to say anything or?
I just wanted to say that I'm very excited to serve on the board with everybody and just very honored to serve our great city. So that's it.
I will say, Gary, it has been a pleasure to be your partner the last 4 years. You are a great partner. It's odd to now that, because I feel like I've kind of remained your partner for the last few months because I haven't really been able to let it go. But now I'll have to kind of let it go a little bit because, but yeah, it's really been an honor to serve with you. And yes, so thank you. I will say that I went to PBS, our local PBS station invited me to come to a tornado town hall that was held at, I think it's called it's not O'Fallon, but it's the O'Fallon part of the city of St. Louis. It's a Y, but it's also, I think they call it like an O'Fallon Rec Center / YMCA. But it was held there. Carol Daniels hosted basically a town hall with a number of people that submitted questions. Of course, the mayor, Kara Spencer, was there. I was not asked any questions, which is not surprising. The focus was definitely largely on the city of St. Louis. But it was great to be there. It was great to hear from people in the city who are still very affected, certainly concerned about the city's response. It was broadcast on PBS, I believe it was yesterday. So if you're interested, I'm sure I could send it to you. But it was great. It was an honor to be a part of it. It was, and again, just very, it was great to hear from members of the city of St. Louis, just their experiences of, how the day went, certainly how the response has been. So I was also, did a great job giving the employees a town hall on, I guess that was last Thursday. Talked all about the budget, allowed me to tell everybody that they were going to get a $600 retention bonus so that they stick around till October 1st. And I just wanted to let everybody know that I got a lot of thanks from that. So I wanted to pass on everybody's appreciation for that retention bonus. And then I was also at the tax reform thing. We also did, just so everybody's aware, we did an employee pool party at Shaw Park, the Shaw Park pool, this past Friday. There wasn't a ton of people there, but it also was a beautiful evening, and I hope we'll do it again because I know the people that were there really enjoyed it. So that was great. It was just for employees and their families. So, and then also there was a police and fire alumni barbecue in Shaw Park on Saturday. Also a beautiful day. I think it was well attended from what I saw. Former police chief Kevin Murphy was there, so it was nice to see him. He was the police chief when I first came on. He looks great. He's obviously doing really well, so it was nice to see him. So, but that's all I have. So. David?
Really quickly, we had a productive meeting with FEMA today. They joined we meet Tuesday and Thursday every week to talk about the tornado restoration. So it's a staff meeting, but FEMA joined us today. They're going to be joining us hopefully on a weekly basis, but from time to time. So we just reviewed our project with them. We're making really good progress on restoration and the planning for that and the prep for it. So we talked through that. We've really built out so we have a 60-day window to submit our projects to FEMA. And ultimately get, reimbursement for those, get them approved for reimbursement. Then you go and for things like debris removal and safety and security at the time of the event, those costs have already been incurred. So we built our project with those and we've submitted that. So that's really the first piece that's been built into it. We're getting there as far as the streetlight evaluation throughout the city. It's a really in-depth process. We've got staff that actually goes out at night to look at these things. During the day, we're doing structural analysis on these poles to see which ones are cracked, what the issues may be with them. So we're getting a really good feel for what that street lighting project will ultimately look like. The sidewalk project is underway, so especially around the schools, around Wydown, they filled in a lot of those spots already. And then Central is another area of priorities. So trying to get the areas around the schools done first, and then get into the neighborhoods. So if you remember when that contract was approved, there were over 200 slabs that need to be done throughout the city. So we talked about that. We've got Lockmuller that's working on the design for Wydown. All of the irrigation that was damaged is within that section, so that will be incorporated there. We're going to get the estimates on the subdivision monuments here, hopefully shortly. We're making really good progress on, we're making progress, I'll say, on the tree pruning and the stump removal. It's kind of slow going. Right now, we're down a few people in public works. We've had some turnover there. So our in-house capability is really kind of taking a hit with that, especially with leaf collection coming up. So it's gonna be difficult for us to work that in. And we're probably gonna have to rely on some private contractor work to keep that moving along. But the tree replanting plan, we're making a lot of progress with that as well. So I know that's something we're hearing from residents quite a bit on. We'll have another update. We put one out on August 8th. I would anticipate that we'll have another one within the next week or so that we'll share on social media and we'll put up on our website to let residents know what's going on. As soon as we have this project built with FEMA and we know exactly what this is going to look like over the next, couple of years, 3 years probably to get through the whole tree replanting plan. But once we have kind of these projects and timelines established, we'll have the Lockmuller plans in hand as far as the concepts for Wydown. At that point, we intend to have the public meetings. We're better prepared to answer questions about what the recovery projects will look like. And we'll also have those concept designs that people can give feedback on. So look for that to happen, I would think in October here, and we're on pace to hit those marks. So Just want to give an update on that process. Everybody's really hard at work on that. So that's what's going on with FEMA. Aside from that, the assistant city manager position, hopefully we're ready to make an announcement within the next week or two and get everything finalized with the candidate we're talking to. So really excited to get that spot filled. It's a critical one for us here, and I'll keep you all posted with that as well.
Can I ask a quick question? On FEMA,
Yes.
how does reimbursement work? Is it rolling as we get different parts of the project in, or is it all?
Yeah, so
And
for
when should we
things like
expect something?
debris removal and safety, obviously those are done and that's going to be a straight reimbursement. For other projects,
Timing-wise.
they will pay you in advance
Okay.
for certain projects. And that's something we're going to have to work out with them as we build these out over the next 60 days. Some will probably be reimbursed. We may have others though, where they front load the money and then we spend it down as the project goes. But that's something that hasn't been worked out and it will be worked out hopefully over the next few weeks here.
Thanks. I move we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.